So Wojtek, thank you so much for being here again. I really appreciate your time and, of course, your
Sure.
expertise. And we are honored to have such an important foundation as the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation to help us out with this very exciting project. So first of all, if you want, could you please briefly describe your area of expertise and also like yourself? Tell me a bit about
Mhm.
yourself. Very briefly.
Mm.
It's not necessary to be like very, very, very long.
Yeah, I've been CEO, Director General of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation since January 2019. Prior to that, I was in international relations. In the practical field, I was running international cooperation of the Warsaw City Hall. Before that, I was working for the Ombudsman of the Republic of Poland, where I was in charge of the international cooperation there, human rights, exchange of best practices, establishing new links to other organizations worldwide, bilaterally and multilaterally. I am a graduate of international relations at Warsaw University and the Diplomatic Academy. Started my professional career as a professional diplomat at the Foreign Ministry of Poland. And I have been involved with the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation since its beginnings. It has been established in 2009 as a response to the worsening condition of the post-camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, post-camp infrastructure, and all personal items of survivors and victims of the concentration and extermination camp. By that time, which was 13, 14 years ago, we already knew, by saying we, I mean my generation, so people who have been brought up to some extent in communist Poland, but then mainly entered their professional careers in democratic and free Poland. We came to understand that it is our responsibility to take care of the traces of the Holocaust and other crimes against humanity perpetrated during World War II. And we focused on establishing this foundation with the help of survivors, of course. And one of the leaders was Professor Władysław Bartoszewski, who was a survivor himself, and he was the founder of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation. At that time, in 2009, he was Secretary of State in Prime Minister Donald Tusk's cabinet. And it was his lifetime mission to take care of all the remains at Auschwitz-Birkenau. And I think he regarded this as his most important mission. And it was always a big honor to work in this field, and to run this organization is something which I regard as a great honor and something distinguishing. So we think of the past as our responsibility, but we try to shape the future, safeguarding all the remains for future generations, because this is the most important mission of the foundation. We're here to take care financially and organizationally of the preservation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, so that anyone in the future, because this is a perpetual undertaking, anyone in the future should have the chance to visit Auschwitz-Birkenau in person or remotely. And there is a project which I would like to talk about briefly, which came up during COVID, and it opened a new frontier for the foundation and for the Auschwitz Memorial, which is about remote guided visits through digital means of communication. So we know that we are here to make this place accessible and keep it accessible for everyone. It is, in the Polish tradition, a cemetery with a little bit over 1.1 million people having been murdered at Auschwitz-Birkenau. It is the symbol of the Holocaust for the crimes committed in World War II, and as such in the world, and recognizable in the world. And as such, we know that this responsibility rests on us. So the foundation has been established, as I said, in 2009, and ever since it has organized a coalition of 40 international governments, which have made financial contributions to our perpetual capital, the endowment. There is some major cities, Berlin, London, Paris, have made contributions also. We have a wider range of private donors, persons, philanthropists, but also enterprises which make contributions and help us in our work. Without them, it would not be possible. And the way this foundation is operating is we have an endowment, which the foundation is investing safely. And from the yields, annually, we are transferring funds to the memorial, the Auschwitz Memorial, and thus financing the preservation program for which the foundation is responsible exclusively. So we're the only foundation which makes this work financially possible. Sorry, it's a bit long, but I'm always trying to give a context.
It's perfect, because you, with this question, you have also answered like the second and the third, questions. So it's just fine. Thank you so much.
For all the viewers, I didn't know the questions in advance.
Perfect. But yeah, no, it sounds extremely interesting, of course, and I was overwhelmed, like in a good way, about like how many international governments are also supporting you, because I also believe that is a very important mission, a very crucial mission, the one that you are. When I say you, I mean like the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation, carrying out in this aspect. I think is very important to preserve memory of such a traumatic past. I think it's a very good sign that like so many multilateral agreements are being signed in that aspect. So thank you so much for your answer. Moving on to, since you have already replied to your area of expertise, which was the next question, and somehow the role of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation. I want now to move on to the role and relevancy of collective historical memory, in your opinion. So in your view, what is the role and relevancy of collective historical memory in today's society? Understanding collective historical memory, as for instance what you are doing in the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation to restore and preserve the past in order to save it to the future, so they can understand what has happened in the past without biased and without like any raw information that can be somehow misleading.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good question. I think that the driving logic behind our work is that the number of visitors of the last normal pre-COVID year in 2019, there were 2.3 million visitors arriving at Auschwitz-Birkenau from all over the world. We have in total, I think, visitors from 190 countries, which, if you compare it with the number of seats at the United Nations General Assembly, it's the whole world, basically. And then there is 350 guides who are guiding on a daily basis at the memorial. So whenever a group arrives at Auschwitz, one of these guides are used to explain the history, the meaning, and the consequences of the crimes committed at Auschwitz to those visitors. And these guides are guiding in 21 languages, which also shows you that it's a global undertaking to explain and to share the memories of survivors, the historical facts, to people who come because they feel the need to come. It's no one is forced to visit Auschwitz-Birkenau. I think people should know that they are ready to visit a place which tells probably the darkest parts of our history, of the history of Europe in the 20th century. So people should be ready, and I believe that most of them are. No one is forced to come. And the memorial or the foundation are not really reaching out to people to visit. We are there. And everyone who wants to see and witness can visit at any time. A visit is free of charge, because this is, as I said in the beginning, a cemetery in the Polish tradition. So if you feel the need to visit, you're most welcome. There is a fee for guides, for whom this is a profession, so they need to be paid. And as I said, we had 2.3 million visitors. COVID was a difficult situation, like with so many other cultural institutions who were on the lockdown. In 2020 and 21 respectively, there were 0.5 million visitors. And last year, there was a steep increase. We just have the numbers which have come in. It's over 1.1 million visitors again. So I'm saying this because it shows us that there is a growing interest, right? Time is passing. Survivors are passing away, unfortunately. Still, some are with us and with young generations, and it's always very interesting and very moving to meet with survivors who are telling their personal stories. But there is less and less of them, and as time approaches, they will not be present, will not be with us. That's why the whole sector is thinking, what will happen next? Once survivors are not here to tell us their story, what will happen then? And that's why I also think new technologies are being called to provide answers. And I think that because people are interested, and over the past 10 years, up until 2019, there was an annual increase of 5 to 7% of visitors coming to Auschwitz-Birkenau. So it shows us that there is a growing interest, contrary to time passing. And we are here to serve these people who want to learn about these atrocities. And this place, Auschwitz-Birkenau, like all the other extermination camps built by Nazi Germans, were not established to last for 80 years. In most cases, they were built by prisoners themselves without any skills in construction, very primitive, without any preparation, and they are falling apart. Auschwitz-Birkenau is the biggest and best preserved concentration camp and extermination camp worldwide. But of course, 80 years after World War II, it needs very concerted and professional effort to keep it as it was in 1945. And the logic of our work is we are not improving anything. We're not rebuilding, the ruins of gas chambers and crematoria in Birkenau. They will remain ruins because they're proof of the crimes. They have been blown up by the Nazis as they were leaving, and we will keep them in their shape. They need to be secured. They need to be reinforced in their present condition, but we are not changing their shape. So we are not rebuilding a museum so that people better understand how it was when there were prisoners there. No, we are keeping it as it was in 1945. This is our purpose. And we are doing so because people, we think, want to learn and want to understand. At the same time, telling the history of those terrible years through the perspective of survivors is, in my opinion, I don't have research, I don't have data, but in my opinion, growingly important because it allows for using an authentic perspective and an individual perspective, which is also very emotional. Only yesterday, I had a discussion with colleagues from various fields, and there is, of course, a tension between giving visitors a historical perspective with numbers. There were so and so many prisoners in the summer of 1944. Over 400,000 Hungarian Jews were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Most of them killed upon arrival in the gas chambers and burnt in the crematorium of Birkenau. There were so many brick barracks, wooden barracks. You can explain the sectors, how it was organized. This is all according to facts. And then there is another perspective which brings in emotions, like people had to look for shoes. We just launched a campaign together with the International March of the Living, which is about saving 8,000 children's shoes, which are in the custody of the museum, of the Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum. We have over 100,000 shoes in total of prisoners. 8,000 of these used to belong to children. And when you bring in a survivor, luckily we still have survivors with us who are telling their story, how important it was for them to have an intact pair of shoes in this terrible place, which is humid, extremely cold in winter, very hot and dry in summer. Shoes were saving lives, or they could save lives, right? So we just heard the story of one of the survivors who said he was able to trade in a piece of bread against a pair of shoes. When he was deported to the camp, his shoes were torn, they had holes, and this was one of the ways when prisoners could get ill very quickly, and as a result of that, die very quickly because there was no medicine, food was very scarce, so they would die very quickly. It was very important to have a functioning pair of shoes. So he was able to put aside some bread and then trade this against a pair of shoes. And this is an emotional perspective, right? When you have someone who tells their story, of course, against numbers, but it's emotional. In my personal opinion, you need a mixture. For visitors from the 21st century, you need a mixture of both. And when we're using new technologies nowadays, we are right now building an online platform for remote guided visits, so that anyone from all over the world who is not able to come in person will have the chance to see the place and experience it through the eyes of a living guide. So you will be able, for example, if you're based in Copenhagen or in Madrid, you will be able to book a guided tour. Let's say Tuesday, it's in Warsaw, it's now 11:30. At 12 o'clock, your guided tour will begin. And at 12 o'clock, you will enter this waiting room, like Zoom, and you will connect with a human being at the other end who will be based in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and this will be your guide. And together with this person, for 1 hour and 40 approximately, you will be taking part in a guided tour, which will show you the history and will also use examples of survivors, their testimonies, in which they share their story and their personal experience, like from the separation ramp at Birkenau when they arrived with their families and were either chosen to work in extreme conditions and exist in extreme conditions in the camp, or, like in most cases, directed towards the gas chambers and crematoria. So bringing in an emotional component is extremely important in our daily work, and that's what we are trying to do. Also, thanks to COVID, because COVID opened this perspective for us. Before that, it was mainly about, the focus of the foundation was to secure the preservation of all authentic remains. But once the memorial was under lockdown, we realized, and also the world was very helpful, because the memorial received, and the foundation, lots of voices from all over the world saying, this place, like no other in the world, needs to be accessible. And we understand that the lockdown requires the museum to be closed, but you have to think of something. And in a wonderful partnership with Israeli companies and Polish companies from the digital sector, also Orange, the mobile provider, would build this program where we now have a stable and secure internet network on site. We have devices from providers, and we have a software which will very soon be launched so that visitors from all over the world will be able to visit the place who in other circumstances would never have the chance to experience it live, because we're talking about reaching people and audiences in Latin America, in large parts of Africa, Asia, who will never come to Poland because it's either too expensive, too far away, too difficult to organize. A wide range of reasons why they will not come. And we know from our experience that more and more people are interested. So this is to provide a platform.
Thank you so much for such an interesting answer. I was thinking about that, like when you were saying like you have merged, first of all, like the digital experience and also like the physical one, the on-campus, on-site experience. I was thinking also like that would help to preserve memory, because also like by the fact that just like going through Auschwitz in a digital way can also like help preserve it through recordings and so on. So that will of course like help for future generations, I believe, to create a picture, and a great picture of what Auschwitz was. And also like I 100% agree with you, and I really like your answer on a mixture, an approach that somehow merges data and statistics and also emotions, because like data of course is, in my opinion, somehow morbose. Like you want to see how impactful something was, in the sense to kind of like measure its intensity, right? But we cannot forget that like those 6 million people who perished during the Holocaust in the whole Europe were individual human beings with their aspirations, ambitions, dreams, and of course like fears. So I think that you are doing like your response kind of like make me feel like you are doing such a great job preserving those individual objects. So I would love, like off record, congratulate you for that task. I never had the chance to go to Auschwitz-Birkenau, though I would love to. But I have read several books on these aspects, such as Hannah Arendt's Eichmann in Jerusalem, or Primo Levi's If This Is a Man. And for instance, like when you were saying this thing about the soup and the prisoner who exchanged the soup, like the food and for the pairs of shoes, I was remembering like one passage of the book of Primo Levi's when he kind of like trade bread for other benefits. So it's very, very interesting to use like these individual components for also depict how tough the situation was. So I really like your answer. Thank you so much. Now I would like to ask you, like collective memory is something that somehow can create like some sort of controversy nowadays, because there are some reactionary parties, sadly, that they don't want to accept what the past has been. I am not an expert in Polish politics, but I know because of some preliminary research that I have carried out, that there are some components of the society that are somehow questioning Holocaust and what has happened. In my personal case, in the area I have more knowledge on, which is the Spanish collective memory, half of the population neglect or reject the historical explanation of what happened during our own civil war and genocide of Republicans. So I wanted to ask you, in your point of view, do you think like collective memory on Holocaust, on this particular issue, not in a general term, on Holocaust is being politicized worldwide and of course in Poland?
I don't see any serious political party or influential grouping in Poland which questions historical facts, that I must say, for the first. Of course, Auschwitz-Birkenau, as we all know, it's a global symbol of the Holocaust, and it's also a global symbol of where hatred leads to, where indifference leads to, and as such, it is, as you said, a phenomenon. Unfortunately, a human phenomenon, because it's a story of course, the biggest group were European Jews, and this mad idea of Adolf Hitler to erase all traces of Jewish life in Europe luckily was never met. And this is also part of our responsibility today. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we preserving every item we discover in Auschwitz? You know, every shoe, every spoon, every eyeglass? Because if we decide to do otherwise, if we decide to neglect one individual item, let's say those shoes, children's shoes, we will to some extent contribute to his plan, right? Because he wanted every trace to be wiped out. So in most cases, we only have these pair of shoes. Very often we don't know. In most cases, we don't know whom they belong to. Every now and then, a miracle happens, and the wonderful team of conservators at Auschwitz, and we have 30 professionals working with glass, wood, leather, paper, brickstone, who are based at Auschwitz and who daily perform these extremely difficult, also psychologically, tasks in preserving the material. Every now and then they discover, you know, a small inscription, 80 years into the end of World War II and the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, through which they are able to, and the team of historians at the memorial, they're able to trace back or connect this item with a human being, with a victim, of which there was nothing left. So we know that these little items, we call them material witnesses, because very often they are the only ones who are left. And this is our responsibility. And of course, growing populism and hatred and racism and anti-Semitism, violent anti-Semitism, which is, I think, the biggest threat nowadays, they are a big challenge. And that's also where places like Auschwitz-Birkenau step in and should be used to a larger extent centrally by governments, by educational departments, by local authorities, cities, school programs. We do have the proof, the evidence of crimes committed. And I think it's an absolute must that teenagers, starting from a certain age, at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the recommended minimum age is 15 years. They should pay a visit, you know, remotely or in person. In person, it's always better. Nothing can replace a personal visit. Nothing can replace a walk on the ruins of Birkenau. And in the barracks of Auschwitz, where you really understand that the segregation, step-by-step approach of regimes has led directly to the perfectioning of crime, which is beyond comprehension. I've been there many times. I don't understand how it's possible, but we as a human species, we are able to do it. And the evidence is there. So the collective memory is necessary. Of course, one dimension is to respect the dead. And this is one of the most important, I think, roles of memory in societies, to keep us together. The other is we're there as a warning. And I think that the effort should be there of politics to divert the attention towards places like Auschwitz, where people can be warned. And this is the warning voice, if you want, of Auschwitz, the crying voice of Auschwitz. It's not silent, it's very loud, and it speaks through the numbers, but it speaks also through individual fates, which have ended tragically. Is not even the right word. Right? It's much worse than that. And I have to say, you know, the memorial is not resting with talking about the history as it was in the 30s and 40s of the 20th century. The director of the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum is, for example, sending out seasons postcards around Christmas, Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's Eve every year, which are very simple in their idea and construction. On the interior, there is wishes. May you have a blessed season. And on the first page, there is always a different picture. And this different picture reflects on a crisis, a current crisis. So I can remember that in the last couple of years, we had a family, from example, fleeing Burma, Rohingya being expelled from Burma. We had a little boy from China who belongs to the Muslim minority in China, who's being threatened by the communist military personnel. We have pictures of a Yemenite family fleeing their country, of Syrian refugees, of Afghan women following the taking over of power by the Taliban. This year, it was a refugee at the borderline between Poland and Ukraine, suffering from the war in Ukraine due to Russia's invasion into Ukraine. So it's we are very much aware that we have made, as a human species, we have made this experience, and unfortunately, it is applicable everywhere else. And that's why this meaning of Auschwitz, unfortunately, again, is very up to date. And we are here not only to tell the story of those 1.1 million people, or 6 million people, or even more million people killed during World War II, but also to warn young generations that this history can be repeated, and that actually, in many places around the world, we are on the way there. Luckily, not to my knowledge, there was no industrial killing at that scale as in Auschwitz following 1945. Still, there are labor concentration camps in communist China, re-education camps, which, surprisingly or not, look very much the same as the camp in Birkenau when we look at the map, at the topography. So we're here to warn.
Yeah, and I think like warning is such an essential task nowadays to raise awareness and also to help people understand the dangerous nature of some decisions that are being implemented worldwide. Because as you have said, maybe it's not just about what has happened in the past, but what is happening in other places around the world. So in this aspect, I think like Auschwitz-Birkenau, and this is why I was very, very, very happy to have you in this interview, plays a crucial role, a key role in warning people who are somehow confused or might end up voting for these kind of like authoritarian leaders, or in the case that they are like democratically elected at the beginning, or that may somehow support like their decisions or experience like this kind of like anti-Semitist or racist or xenophobic sentiments. So I think that you play indeed a crucial role in this aspect. Thank you so much for this answer. Of course, this one was beautiful, and I'm very much looking forward to editing and to put it together with the rest of the responses. Now I want you to answer in more abstract way, like in your opinion as a professional in Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation, and you have already mentioned that you have how can I put it, adapted to contemporary challenge such as COVID. You launched these virtual visits that I am honestly very looking forward to enroll in it. You have convinced me, but also so like contemporary challenge might pose like contemporary global challenges might pose some obstacles to collective memory, such as COVID in your case, and so on. And of course, like collective memory, doesn't matter the nature, can be improved. It always can be improved thanks to new technologies, new policies, and so on. So in your point of view as an expert in this area, how could we improve in general terms collective memory, not only Auschwitz, Birkenau, but in general terms? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I think that in abstract terms, I think that access should be improved and increased for audiences who may find it interesting, and for audiences for whom the educational component and dimension is important, be it families, be it universities, be it professional groups. There is a wonderful example from Auschwitz-Birkenau. Over some years, it has been leading on a project where prisons have been visited. So an educational team had visited prisons, and they met with prisoners who committed various crimes. And by presenting the history of Auschwitz-Birkenau, they were discussing also violence used in everyday life nowadays, and the meaning to society and the threats to society. So comparing these two situations, where violence had led to during World War II, and where it leads to nowadays, also gives an interesting perspective. And I think that providing this experience to various audiences, not only for Auschwitz, not only for places which tell the story of crimes committed during World War II, but all other places also, which have something important to contribute to the cohesion of societies, is a big challenge. And I think that technology provides a wonderful platform for that. Nowadays, it's obvious, the internet, you can access almost any place. I was a little bit surprised when we started working on our project, on our remote guided tours, that once we had selected our partners, the software developers and the creative agency, and we started working and thinking about where should the paths through Auschwitz and Birkenau lead, what should people see, what kind of testimonies should they witness. So we were well advanced, and then we had this thought, but wait a minute, if guides are going to walk on site with their mobile devices, there should be stable internet, otherwise they will not be able to have guided tours. And the surprise was that there is not everywhere we needed a stable access. So of course, the basic functionalities must be there. And for big places, and Auschwitz-Birkenau is one of the biggest, it's easier because there is the world attention and there was awareness and people know that we need the help. And we try to be there also as a role model, but also a partner to all the other places which are not less important. That has to be said very, very openly. But they struggle because of a variety of reasons. As I said, Auschwitz-Birkenau is the biggest, best preserved. Others are less good preserved or not preserved at all because all traces have been wiped out. Still, there are memorials, and Poland has this very tragic responsibility to take care of these former concentration extermination camps, which it does under communism since 1945, in Free Poland also. So that's something that the country has been doing over the past. And we are also here to support others in various ways. But I think that access should be increased. I think that whoever wants and feels the need should have the possibility, the opportunity to visit. And this is nowadays possible. We have also entered a new project launched during COVID. It's about a virtual VR reconstruction of the historical camp. So, because as you know, probably, or most of your viewers know, Birkenau is preserved to some extent. Auschwitz I main camp is mostly preserved, Birkenau not so. So there is lots of, it's huge, the territory is really vast, the whole camp is around 200 hectares. And many buildings are not there. Once you arrive, you see how big it was, but you don't see everything. And as I said, we don't want to rebuild. This is not the purpose of our mission. But however, because virtually we are nowadays capable of doing so, we would like to offer also this way of understanding how the camp operated. And the foundation has successfully reached out to donors. We secured funds for a virtual reconstruction of the camp in 1944. That was the time when the camp was at the peak of its operations. It was the biggest historically. And we are doing so with the help of a Polish startup, which is redrawing digitally the topography of Birkenau, so that in the future, we also would like to redraw Auschwitz I main camp, perhaps also Auschwitz III, Monowitz, the labor camp. And then once we have a ready topography of 1944, we will be able to roll out educational programs, invite people also who arrive in person, put on goggles, and then walk on the site as it was in 1944. But you can do this obviously also through the internet, and you can invite school classes from California, Australia, Argentina, or elsewhere to connect live with a guide on these historical grounds, enter, for example, a brick barrack and see how prisoners existed. I'm always struggling to use the word, to use the phrase lived, because it was a different form of existence. So I think this is very valuable, and this is possible thanks to new technologies and also the internet and the technologies we have at hand, which are developing very quickly. And we're only in the beginning of the process, and it was our strategic decision to enter this sphere without any prior expertise. So it's a process, it's learning by doing, and extremely interesting also to look at the developments of metaverse, for example, and the future of education in this virtual environment. I think Auschwitz-Birkenau should be there, and other important places should be present virtually, and we have to see where it takes us from there. Of course, the responsibility is extreme. I have to mention that it's always an ethical decision if you decide to reconstruct, because virtually we are reconstructing a camp, something we don't do in reality. If you decide to reconstruct the gas chambers and crematoria of Birkenau, which we don't see as we visit because they have been blown up, they don't exist, it is an ethical decision. Also because survivors are with us, and for them, it must be a very difficult experience to even think about, having the virtual chance to enter a place which they associate with the worst, with losing all of their family, for example, and close ones. So we are in the process of thinking how to apply these technologies in educational strategies so that they're ethical and make sense and no damage. But times are changing, right? And the dynamic is extreme also with social media. The memorial has in total more than 2 million followers over Twitter, Facebook. And these are not only followers, they're not passive. These people are really actively involved in sharing the history and commenting on the history, in educating family members of theirs. And this is, this is a dimension which is extremely helpful. And I can remember I was participating in a visit of one of the ambassadors who's based in Warsaw from a European country, and he brought his family and his children, as they were walking with a guide on site, they were every now and then saying, "Oh, I remember this from Instagram, or I saw this on TikTok, or I saw this on Facebook." So for the generation of my children, I have two daughters. One is 12, the other is 7. The 7-year-old one, not so much, but already now to some extent. But the 12-year-old, her world is digital. And if we want to give them the chance to understand what the human being is capable of and warn them and open opportunity for them to discuss, we have to be present in the digital world. This is the same responsibility as taking care of the authentic remains, physical remains at Auschwitz.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a interesting and enlightful answer. It was very, very interesting, and I really like how you connect possible improvements with digital opportunities or digital developments. Let's put it in this way, which also leads me to ask you my follow-up question, which is since digital improvements, digital developments, new digital technologies, let's say, have to be integrated in collective memory organizations, foundations such as the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation, and among others. What role can video games play in collective memory? Can they play a role at all, or do you think? And when I say video games, I don't want you to think in this typical shooting game that is just made for entertainment, but more some sort of a game as an artistic expression, as a way of representing a reality in which, through the digital immersion of the user, of the video game player, some sort of values, awareness, ethics are shared with the user. What is your opinion in that field?
That's a very, very difficult question, because it touches upon ethics. And of course, we at the foundation and at the memorial, I think I can speak for both. We are aware that virtual reality, AR, comes from the gaming industry. The technology comes from the gaming industry. However, as soon as we start thinking about this and projecting and planning, we have to be aware that this is not about a game. So the philosophy, it's not about an experience which allows you to be entertained, or it is about education, and it's the most difficult education I can remember. I'm from a generation which remembers very well from various classes, be it language courses, be it history, be it geography, that Holocaust studies, they leave a very deep trace in your psyche, a post-traumatic trace. And whenever I go with friends or with colleagues who have never been, and they learn that I work for this organization, and they say, "Hey, listen, I've been with 6th, 7th, 8th grade, whatever, when I was a teenager. I can't recall a lot, but I know it was very difficult." Some say, "I can remember when we stood in this room at the perpetual permanent exhibition, and I saw the pile of human hair, which stays with me until today. And this was an experience made 20 or 30 years ago." And it's very difficult. Some people decide never to go because they remember this school trip, and they say it was too much, I can't go. Some want to visit again and have a different experience. But all of these people are saying that it stays with them. Something really deep and tragic stays with them, And I guess that's one of the reasons why, for some people, Auschwitz-Birkenau is regarded as the root of the European Union. All the atrocities committed there and experienced there have led to European Union and other places, but it stands pars pro toto for all the other places, and especially the Holocaust. It has led to politicians in 1945 really understanding that we need a new solution for these nation states here on the continent. And I think that this is part of the success we are experiencing. Of course, we are in a very difficult and challenging situation right now with Russia's invasion against a sovereign country, a war next door to Poland. We have financial challenges, we have energy challenges, which are unprecedented. But I think that the European Union has shown that the concept, the political concept, and the concept of societies cooperating and learning from each other, from youngest ages. Let's look at the Erasmus program and other exchange programs is extremely valuable, and it really makes sense. It's probably on supranational level the only success story worldwide. So in this sense, also Auschwitz has led to this terrible experience has led to something really meaningful, and this is also collective memory. And I think that when now we go back to the place and individual experience of people who want to visit and who need to visit, we need to remind ourselves that new technologies have also a very important role to play, but they can be dangerous. I mean, it's like with a knife. You can use it to smear butter on bread, but you can also kill somebody. And the same applies to new technologies. The same applies to gaming. And I mentioned this already in my previous comment. This sector, like so many other things in our life, is so dynamic. It is difficult. It is challenging to manage these processes. I said that we decided to enter new technologies, to enter virtual reality, to enter the internet as a tools to reaching out to new audiences. But we are very much aware that it can be risky. Luckily, we have survivors with us who are very much involved and who are, the beacons of education, and who ever since 1945 have been there to, maybe a little bit later, not immediately after World War II, but they have understood their role in reaching out to young generations and talking to them and discussing and sharing their experience. And they are supporting. They are supportive. They see what we do, and they say, listen, Marian Turski, who famously in 2020 during the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau used the phrase, Auschwitz did not fall from the sky. And he rephrased Austria's president, Alexander von der Bellen, who used this in German. But he said, we have to understand nowadays that these processes are repetitive. They can happen again. And we have these wonderful tools which can be used to reach many, many, many more people than we could if they only were coming in person. But they can also be applied otherwise. And we know from populist movements all over the world, in the US, in Europe, in Latin America, that hate messages can be spread over the internet very, very easily and very successfully. This is something we need to take away from these new chances also.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a great answer, honestly. I think it's very, very interesting. Of course, it was like a very, very difficult question because like there is not a yes or no. It's not a yes and no question, so it's very, very difficult to properly tackle. But so thank you so much for taking the time to reflect it and to share your views.
It's not black or white. You're right. There is a whole array of gray. There is a big gray scale, right? And yes. I think it's even very much an individual case-by-case decision. What do you reconstruct, and to what extent, what degree of detail do you reconstruct, right? And then you have to think, what emotions will it trigger? I mean, and what's the purpose? What would we like to people? Let's say in theory that we will reconstruct the gas chambers and crematoria of Birkenau in VR, right? Now, will we allow people to enter? And if yes, do we want people to see the ovens of the crematoria? If yes, why? What for? It's not our intention, and definitely not our role, to shock people. Everyone should make their decision. Do I want to visit, and do I want to enter? Do I want to understand less or more? Do I want to hear this? People have, all sorts of reactions when they arrive. There is people who cry, who fall in despair, who laugh hysterically, because there is various reactions, which is also a very interesting part of the work of the memorial, right? Every now and then you read in press articles that people are dancing on the railroads, for example, right? And this should be condemned. I think the role of the memorial is to educate and to explain that this is a place of tragedy and we should behave in a certain way. But I also privately understand that people can react in other ways because they have lost family members there, for example, right? And who am I to tell them you should not be overreacting by some standards? No, it's legitimate, right? Because it's an extreme place with extreme, unimaginable for us, our generation, emotions and experience involved. So it is a case-by-case decision, and it is a case-by-case, a very difficult discussion. What is it that we want to trigger, and what is it that will be helpful to people who arrive or who want to deal with this history to understand? If I may, there is a very short, but I think it's connected with this example. There is an organization, an NGO based in Japan, which is active in the Holocaust education area. And what they do is they enter school classes with an item, with a suitcase, which used to belong to one of the victims. And they don't start their education process with telling the history of the Holocaust. You know, in the 30s, it started with public banks being prohibited, or Jews being prohibited to sit on public banks in public parks. Then Jews were not allowed to buy bread in the morning up until late hours in the afternoon, which resulted in them not being able to buy bread at all. Then they were not able to enter public swimming pools. They were segregated. And step by step, salami tactics, they were excluded from public life and then deported to concentration and extermination camps. This is not the way this organization in Japan is dealing with the subject. The way they are entering the discussion with young people is they're asking them a couple of critical questions. For example, have you experienced in the past 2 years, in the past 2 weeks, an example of discrimination in your neighborhood, in your family, in this classroom? And if so, have you done something against it? If not, why? Have you seen someone being maltreated, treated in an unfair way on the streets of Tokyo, for example, or Osaka in the past 2 weeks? What was your reaction? What were your feelings? Have you seen other people react? And only after, young people get involved and they start to understand the context, what this is about, ethics and responsibility, only then this historical example of the Holocaust is being launched, and a very interesting connection is being built, and a bridge is being built between what had happened then and what is happening nowadays. And I think that this is a very good example how we can also work with visitors at places of horror, allowing people, more and more people, because as time passes, the third generation has no direct experience, may find it more difficult to understand the historical context. But if we provide them with ethical choices nowadays, dramatic choices very often, if in public transportation, you can see someone being violent against others, will you react or not? Are you afraid? Or do you have the courage? Will you encourage others to help, stand up, and compare them with what had happened historically? I think then this really makes sense. Then we're showing young people that what it means not to allow Auschwitz from ever happening again, and what it means that this phrase "never again" really matters nowadays.
Thank you so much for that comment on. Yeah, I mean it's very interesting also, like how different, I don't want to say schools because it's more than that, but like the different approaches are being integrated in teaching memory and sharing these experiences. It's not just, as you have said, black and white. It's like full range of approaches, methodologies, techniques, and also like of expressions that can be used to transmit a message in this case, right? To share a message with let's say an audience, though I don't want to use the word audience because it kind of like entails some sort of like entertainment, but visitors or people who have like somehow some interest on this topic. This leads me to my last question, because we are a bit over time, but for me it's fine, because I'm really enjoying this dialogue, but I don't want to steal more of your time. You have said in your previous comment that like is an interesting question, because like it should be studied case by case, and I 100% agree. It should study case by case in every component, and also like in every methodology. Considering who is your audience again, right? Like, are they children? Are they survivors? Are they grown-ups? So I really think so as well. So I want you to think, as I was saying, like this interview is aimed at shedding some light on the role of video games in collective memory, and my particular angle was video games that do not explicitly refer to historical facts, but aim at transmitting some ethical values and some sort of like morals to the players through visual metaphors of what has happened in the past. In this case, this game that I am addressing, which is My Memory of Us, recreates the occupation of Poland by the Nazi Germany. They do not show up the soldiers in their human shape. They are like robots with Nazi uniforms, and the concentration camps are like visual metaphors of it. However, they transmit different, I have played the game, and they transmit different values and morals, such as like solidarity, and also like some other feelings such as discrimination, segregation. As you have said, while you are playing the game, you can see how you are discriminated because you are the game is in black and white, and at one point in the game you are painted in red because you are identified as a non-desired component of society, and then you are discriminated. Your access is increasingly being restricted. So at the beginning you cannot enter in some places. Later in the game you are just literally like followed by the police. So do you think like using this technique, some sort of visual metaphors that have a connection, because this game have like later a connection with real history, which are like individual stories that are displayed in the game, like for instance, like I don't know the names, but like this man was arrested and sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and he survived or he perished in the camp. Do you think like this approach of mixing visual metaphors that do not explicitly refer to historical facts and individual and reliable and individual stories is a useful way to approach collective memory?
Thank you. I think I should start with saying that I have no experience with these games. I would be very interested in trying once, so to see and better understand what you have mentioned right now. I can also comment on one of the topics, one of the aspects you have mentioned. That is, when we decided to reconstruct in VR Birkenau, we decided not to have any human beings included, right? Neither prisoners nor DSS nor barking dogs, no sounds whatsoever, in order not even to try to give viewers, visitors, participants, however we call them, the feeling of what it might have been, because we don't know. Because again, this was so extreme and so difficult. I don't want to know how it was. I'm trying to understand professionally, but I don't want to know how it was. And I certainly wouldn't try to demonstrate to others how it was being a prisoner of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Because it's not only about, it's not only about the physical ramifications, the infrastructure. It's not only about the sound, the temperature. It's about experience, extreme experience, being at the brink of existence, right? Hunger, despair, absolute frustration. I remember the 75th anniversary of the liberation, which has been commemorated at a huge tent which was built up above the death gate in Birkenau for 3,000 guests, and there were survivors present. There were heads of official delegations from 50 states present. There were important donors and visitors. And I remember that there was a moment, the ceremony was soon about to begin, and someone from the organization team approached me and asked for help, because one of the survivors who arrived from Israel with her family, she was in a wheelchair, and this lady was in front of the first row of chairs, and she decided to stop right in the emergency exit. So you had the wheelchair, and right behind it there was the emergency exit. And the team said, we have to do something. We can't let her stand there, because if something happens, she will be in danger, and all the others might be in danger. So we have to do something. And I approached and I asked about her decision, why she decided to be exactly there, and without going into the motivation of the team. And she said it's the exact spot where she for the last time saw her father, who disappeared at the horizon where the gas chambers and crematoria are. And when you hear something like that, you immediately understand that there is no logic which can, it doesn't apply. It just doesn't make any sense and wouldn't make any sense. And in no scenario I can even think of would I be able to show this in a game. So, but then there is, of course, testimonies. And I heard a testimony by this lady, which she was, kind enough to share with me. And I think that the testimonies have an incredible power, and they should be applied in the daily work of memorials, perhaps in gaming also, because it is the voice of people who have seen, and it's not being reconstructed by us, because we haven't seen. What we do in our work, and I'm honored to be working for the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial, supporting them, is that we are in charge of what is left. But it doesn't mean that we are in charge of what has happened there then, because we have no capacity to understand. I mean, I should be speaking of myself. I don't have the capacity to understand. I am often wondering when we are dealing with, or we're trying to reach out to partners who have some sort of historical responsibility, the private sector, for example, which benefited from the crimes of World War II, and there is no understanding and no immediate reaction. I don't have understanding for that. But of different reasons, I'm not trying to put myself in the shoes of victims. And I think here there is a tension with gaming, right? From what you have said, I would not criticize anything. If there is technological possibilities, and I'm sure they're very, very accurate and very precise and very reliable, to let us understand what it feels to be excluded in society, what it feels to be discriminated against, what it feels to lose rights and privileges and so on, and slowly become a minority, which you have not felt a year ago, 2 years ago. This is wonderful. And if the experience of Auschwitz-Birkenau can be helpful, that's also great. But I'm not sure to what extent, there is a direct. I am aware that it stands in contradiction to what I've been saying 20, 30 minutes ago when I said there is a direct connection, because the experience can be used to demonstrate that the processes are similar, but to use the experience itself from Auschwitz-Birkenau, the tragedy, the pain, the loss, and to apply it today is very difficult, I think. Still, I am all for new technologies, and as I said, there is no way around it. It's we have to be there, and constantly we have to work with the creative sector also. And I'm very thankful that we have wonderful partners. Diskin creative agency from Israel is one of them. AppsFlyer, provider of web solutions, is another. There are so many others which are so helpful, and really, friendships have grown around these projects, and we are on a daily basis over Zoom. So based on new technologies, trying to solve these ethical dilemmas. So there is no way around it. And if people can better understand that every one of us plays a role today, and that something horrible has happened in the past, and that there is a connection, the better so. Then yes, they should be used responsibly. And if game makers want to invite experts, educators, guides who have, years of experience and tons of conversations and exchanges with people who suffer from pain because they come from families, or even meetings with survivors, then they should do so. They should ask. I don't have this experience, but there was lots of guides and educators in various places around the world who I'm sure would be very, very interested in being involved in these works.
Thank you so much.